welcome everyone. This is an exciting afternoon we're having here at the Planet Local Summit in Bristol, where hundreds of people, change makers from around the world, are getting together and talking about how we can basically relocalize our planet. And there are just incredible new creative ideas arising. And one of those amazing ideas arising is coming from this gentleman that I'm honored to be sharing this seat with right now, Rupert Reed, whom many people may know about. And I'll ask him a little bit about his background right now. But I can say, just to begin with, that Rupert was one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion and has had deep experience in looking at what is possible to try to transform our society into to wake up to what's going on. And he's coming out with a new book about a new movement, if you'd call it that, and you have to tell me, called the Climate Majority Project. And that's what I'm so excited to be talking with Rupert about today. So welcome, Rupert. I'm so glad we were able to connect here.
Good to be here.
And Rupert and I have known each other for some years and only seen each other in a digital version. So this last day, it's been really wonderful to actually feel you. So it's so great to connect.
Yeah.
So, Rupert, maybe you could tell us first, just a high-level summary, if you will. What is the Climate Majority Project that you're writing about?
Yeah. So, as you say, I helped to launch Extinction Rebellion as one of our key spokespeople and strategists. In 2020, I moved on from XR, partly because it had become clear to me that XR wasn't going to be able to be the vehicle through which we accomplished the transformative changes that we desperately need. Now, I should also say, though, that as you'll be well aware, one of the really exciting things about XR is that, especially in this country and to some extent around the world, we did force a change in the conversation. We forced a change in climate consciousness, which was a wonderful thing to be part of. It was like, wow, something actually worked after all this trying. And, well, my view and that of an increasing number of people who were in XR or who weren't in XR is that the best compliment we can pay to the radical flank of the environmental movement is by taking advantage of the space that Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg opened up that hadn't been there before. And that's the essence of the idea of the Climate Majority Project, to say, while keeping our emphasis on the terrible truth absolutely intact of our predicament, we need to find ways of opening up to a much larger number of people the sense of a kind of welcome to action, welcome to joining with other people who are starting to do the stuff that is actually going to be necessary if we're going to manage to head off collapse. Welcome to handling the difficult truth together. Welcome to being a part of the climate majority, which already exists. There already is a climate majority. There already is a majority of people who are deeply concerned. But that concern needs to be deepened even further by further access to the full truth of the predicament. We need to give people help in handling those difficult truths. We need to give them pathways to activation in all the places in their life where they potentially have power along with other people, in communities, in workplaces, in churches. And that's the kind of thing that the Climate Majority Project is trying to network and facilitate and support.
Yes, well, it's so exciting. And it's so interesting to see how that initial flurry of awareness after XR kind of hit the scene led to some incredible, powerful impacts, right? And all of a sudden, there was a climate emergency passed in the UK. But then it seems like different things are fragmented. So we notice, I follow closely what's going on with like Just Stop Oil as one direction. And I see XR themselves have been trying to come up with their logo about a year ago. So we're not going to disrupt anything anymore. So there are these differences going on. Maybe you can characterize how you see the Climate Majority Project that you're looking at, how it relates to those. Do you think they're wrong? Do you think that it can be complementary? Like, how do you see the whole ecosystem of movements around that?
I'll come directly to that, but the first point I'd like to make is the one I've already made, really, which is that the key thing that we think is now needed is for the climate majority to assert itself. There isn't going to be the kind of transformation that is needed here without most people getting on board. And most people are never going to become radical flankers.
Right.
Most people are never even going to become activists. You know, there'll definitely be more people who are becoming activists in the 2020s, and that's great. But will there be enough? No way. No way will there be enough. If we're going to actually have most people on board, and the climate issue is so vast and so saturating of all of our lives that there just is no way through without most people on board. If most people are going to get on board, it's not going to be with activism, let alone with Extinction Rebellion, let alone with Just Stop Oil, right?
Right.
So what we're trying to offer is something which actually is an invitation that the majority of people could take up. Now, so in terms of the ecosystem then, how I see it, we had XR, which changed the game and opened up this space. What some people thought when XR started to run into a dead end was we should just carry on and push harder. What other people thought was, well, we need to go even more radical, and that's what Just Stop Oil tried to do,
Right.
and what Andreas Malm is also in a different way talking about. What XR have themselves now realized is that actually maybe the ongoingness of the public disruption that Just Stop Oil have been bringing about is having diminishing returns, or even being counterproductive, which is, I confess, what I myself now believe. And therefore, they've started to move in a somewhat more moderate direction, but we're like full on moderate, if you will. It's going to be much easier for people who are perhaps uncomfortable with XR because of its legacy, because of what it's known for, or because of its ongoing endeavors to disrupt, just not to disrupt the public anymore. Those people could be potentially open to the message that we are bringing. So we're trying to be a vehicle which can be really widely appealing. And also crucial about what we're trying to do in the Climate Majority Project is it's about much more than just us. We're trying to name something, to thought lead something, to incubate something. But this is going to be a vast, a wave of an ecosystem, as you put it, in itself, of more or less connected and disconnected, but all pointing in the same direction. Organizations and initiatives. You ask, is the Climate Majority Project a movement? And it's a great question. My answer is sort of, well, yes and no. I mean, a movement isn't a bad word for it, but movement will have some of the wrong associations for some people.
I hear you.
Some people will be thinking, okay, well, movement, that's the kind of thing that activists do. And no, it's not that. And this is why I often use this term wave now. A wave, something which is emerging, which is incredibly diverse, but all pointing in the same direction as a wave does.
I love that. And so let me ask you a question we can sort of mull over, which was, I want to give voice to what I think maybe a fair number of people, including I, felt as a concern, if you will, coming to, as you start to read this book and read these ideas for climate majority, is that, well, look, on the one hand, we clearly need more people to get engaged. On the other hand, what we're looking at is systemic change. And we need to look at the injustices, and we need to look at the massive devastation that's going on right now. And we can't just ignore those, right? And so then the question gets to be, well, then do we have to water down the message of what's needed? So do we have to sort of tread very lightly on the difficult issues in order to try to engage people? And then do we end up just diluting everything so much that it becomes... So this, I think, is a fundamental question. I'd love to
absolutely fundamental question. And, you know, if that was what was going to happen, it wouldn't be worth bothering with. Before I get into it, just let me say one very tiny practical thing about the book, which is that you've been kind enough to read the book manuscript. It's not actually in print yet, folks. You don't try and buy it yet. It's going to appear early in the new year, 2024.
Thank you.
And with Jeremy's very kind endorsement on it, among various other people's.
It's well worth a good read, I can tell you that.
Thank you. And it's called The Climate Majority Project. But as I say, you have to wait till you actually get to be able to buy it and read it for yourselves. So look, if it was about dilution, no way. The first strand of our theory of change in the Climate Majority Project is truthfulness. It's the same thing as was at the essence of Extinction Rebellion. We're absolutely carrying that forward. What we're saying is, look, the truth is much too good to keep to a small radical minority. It needs to be brought to everybody. And our professional audience research that we've done suggests that people are up for the truth. They want the truth. They don't want to be talked down to. They want to be treated like adults, but they realize that the truth is no good to them unless it comes in the right context. So you can't just dump the difficult truth about where we're at on people. You have to give them power and tools to help them handle it. So that's all sorts of different things. It could be, support groups. It could be psychotherapy. One of the things we're specifically arguing for is that when people in schools or universities are teaching ecology or climate science, help in handling those difficult truths ought to be built in, because it's a traumatizing thing to do that teaching. It's a traumatizing thing to do, to give some of the kinds of talks that I give to people where I lay out very starkly the nature of our predicament. And that needs to be built in. Similarly, if people are told the truth and helps to handle the truth, but they don't know what to do next, again, they're just disabled. They just feel powerless, rudderless, etc. So you've got to build in meaningful, effective, pragmatic pathways to action, which could actually add up to being enough. And that's what we're seeking to offer and explain and provide as models. That's what we're seeking to support in concrete cases like General Counsel for Sustainability Leaders, used to be known as Lawyers for Net Zero. These are senior corporate lawyers who are trying to do the right thing on climate. Really interesting development. That's why we're supporting community climate action, which is people in rural communities, often quite conservative communities, who are getting together to grow their own food, getting together to maybe do things like take over their local pub and run it as a social enterprise if it's threatened with being closed. And these kinds of things, very diverse, right? Rural citizens growing their own food, senior corporate lawyers, as I say, all kind of moving in the same direction. These kinds of diverse things, when one starts to kind of see oneself as part of this wave, one starts to think to oneself, maybe, just maybe, this could be enough. And that counters what we think is the greatest obstacle, really, to the mobilization of a climate majority, which is people thinking, I'm too isolated, it just isn't going to be enough, it's hopeless. And that's the crucial fourth and final component of our theory of change, which is sense-making around this, which begins with people understanding the new moderate flank is emerging. The climate majority is emerging. It's growing. It's already happening. It's definitely going to grow more. Added up, it could be enough. It could be enough to stop us from collapsing. And even if it isn't, it will make the any kind of collapse events that do occur a lot less bad than they otherwise would have been. And that's the sort of side order of deep adaptation on the menu, if you see what I mean. And to come back to our earlier conversation that we had on your network. So no watering down. The truth is good enough for everybody. And the truth includes that action is occurring, that action is rising up from the grassroots, that it's mostly below the radar as yet. And that's something which the media also has to step up to and change its practices on. And we're also working, by the way, with journalists and people in the acting profession and so forth. That's another crucial part of the picture. But the whole truth needs to be handled by us all together and acted on together and sense made around together. And then true hope will begin.
Interesting stuff. And so what I was really inspired by some of those examples you were giving of specifics where where people who would not consider themselves to be labeled as activists are actually doing just that kind of stuff. They're making a difference, moving in the right direction. I'm curious, if you could roll out, like, imagine it's 10 years from now, and the Climate Majority Project has just exceeded your wildest dreams in terms of its success.
We got pretty wild dreams.
Okay, well, great, even more valuable. What would you see happening? Like, are you looking at, say, for example, in politics, are you looking at the traditional electoral system now, say in the UK, but with the actual policies being different? You're looking at a new party, you're looking at something that might emerge as things just unravel or bypassing. How are you seeing it engage in the changes that we actually need?
It could be any of those things. It could be all of those things. What is for sure is that absolutely central to our ambition is to change the whole political culture, so that whatever the system is, whether it's the same system or a different one, it looks completely different and feels completely different. So if you think about the UK right now, for example, we're going to have a general election here in a year or so. We've got an unbelievably bad Conservative government. The Conservative Party as a whole is not monolithic. There are elements in the Conservative Party which, unlike in the Republicans in the US, are open to the kind of thing we're talking about. And that's a really important thing to notice. Among the signatories of the founding declaration of the Climate Majority Project are some really good conservative politicians. And that's part of what we're trying to do in depolarizing this whole debate, right? So we want to change the Conservative Party so that the people who are running it right now are, in one way or another, out of power. And the people who are disempowered in the Conservatives right now, who get this stuff, are empowered. With the Labour Party, they're going to almost certainly be a central part of the next government. And their programme is much better than the present Conservative government's. And it's completely inadequate, right? It's completely inadequate compared to the scale of the challenge. So we want to change the Labour Party as well, kind of root and branch. So this could be done through changing these parties from the inside. It could be done through a new entrant onto the scene. Maybe the whole system will change. Obviously, we're big advocates of deliberative democracy. That could be a much more important part of our future. But what is not negotiable is that we have a 5 to 10 year ambition, just the kind of thing you're talking about, for changing the ground, if you will, that all of these political actors are walking on. So that in a general election in 10, 11 years' time, everyone who's a serious player in that election, if we're still having these kind of elections then, everyone who's a serious player will be at least kind of in touch with the kind of thing that we are talking about, change the whole political culture. You could think about it this way: we need a new political class, but that means we need a renewed electorate. The people, the people themselves have to change. They have to be deepened, right? But we have to start where people are, to come back to your previous question, right? But one of the issues with the radical flank is that too often it feels to people as though they're being sort of spoken at from a great distance and told, you've got to come over here. Whereas what we try to do is go to where people are, work with them, work with their values, work with the things that they're already concerned about, and go with them on a journey towards where we all need to be.
And that sounds, by the way, it brings to mind the work of folks from The Alternative, which is another group that we've spoken with on the Deep Transformation Network.
Absolutely.
Indra Adnan and Pat Kane.
So they're quite supportive of what we're trying to do.
Networks, Citizen Agency.
They're supportive. You'll be unsurprised to hear they're supportive of what we're trying to do.
And so, that's so exciting, because that gives this potential for not just keeping fighting against this kind of electoral gridlock, but actually starting from a different place. But then I want to move the consideration to almost saying, let's kind of now go beyond the next 5 or 10 years. And as you know, a lot of my own work and a lot of the interested people on the Deep Transformation Network is about the need for deep system change. And oftentimes I'll go around saying, what I've come to realize, the system isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's meant to do. We need to actually change the system itself. Now, I'm guessing that if you two go and talk, I'm imagining a group of the climate majority people that you're speaking with, to go to them with that message, you're probably not going to make too much headway right now. So I'm curious how you see that interplaying. And I'm not expecting you to necessarily even have a complete definitive answer to this, but I'd love to just explore your thoughts about how, because to me, the most exciting thought of all is that you begin to energize this climate majority, and they begin to move into whatever we might call it, like a transformational majority or whatever, that actually, as we move through the century, that is not just a small group, but millions of people.
Millions upon millions.
Part of the transformation. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how that could unravel from these first steps.
Or re-ravel.
Right.
It's a beautiful question. Again, a very important one. And as you say, I don't have a full answer to it. And the reason I don't have a full answer to it is because this is going to unfold, right? If we're serious about transformative adaptation, part of what we're serious about is not knowing yet what some of the challenges which are going to come down the pike to us are even, let alone what we're going to say exactly when they do come down the pike to us. But to go back to where we start with kind of meeting people with where they are, I do think that there are already the seeds there to point us in the kind of direction that you're talking about. So for example, in my experience, most people, and I mean most people, most ordinary, regular people, rural people as well as urban people, conservative people as well as Labour people or Green people or whatever, most people sense that we cannot go on like this. Most people sense that there's something deeply dissatisfying to them, many of those around them about their lives. Many of them are still kind of playing this game of somehow trying to get that satisfaction through consumer goods, etc., etc. But mostly, at some level, they know.
Yes.
Right. So, and I actually think that, and also most people know that we cannot go on like this, in the sense that most people think that as we are, we're headed for collapse.
Yes.
Right. I mean, every so often, some kind of bold opinion pollster does ask a question like this. You know, do you think that that capitalism will still be here in 50 years' time? Do you think this society will still be here in 30 years' time? Incredibly high percentages say no. Yeah. So that's kind of good, right? That's something we can work with.
I agree.
And we have an incubatee called People Get Real. And what they're trying to do is to expand this sense, this knowledge base of people coming to understand that they're not alone in having these thoughts or feelings, because a lot of this stuff is still a bit taboo, right? It's the technical term, as you will know, is pluralistic ignorance, right? The expression we use around this in the Climate Majority Project is the first stage of a transformation is when most people realize that we cannot go on like this. The second stage of a transformation is when most people realize that most people already realize that we cannot go on like this.
Exactly. Right? Absolutely.
And so that's what's so exciting,
so powerful,
right? And so with People Get Real, one of the things we're hoping is that they are going to start to puncture this pluralistic ignorance and give people the sense that, actually more and more ordinary people are thinking, I want to become part of this climate majority. I want to do something different. I know we cannot go on like this. And also the same in specific domains, among scientists, among insurers. We want these kinds of specific, important, elite peer groups to come to realize that a lot of their peers are not happy with the status quo, the consensus in their own disciplines. More and more scientists, for example, realizing that the way that the IPCC can sometimes sound, okay, they're getting better and they're getting more honest about just how bad the situation is. But there still can be a bit of complacency there when, for example, they still say things like, but we can stay below 1.5 degrees if we all just try a bit harder. It's less and less credible.
Forget about it.
Forget about it. And so we puncture the pluralistic ignorance in every domain, including society at large. And then we can actually start to move in the direction which I share with you, the ambition of the profound transformation which actually has to come. I mean, we're at this conference here on localization. One of the ways I put this is the future is without any question going to be more local. The question is only, is it going to be more local by way of collapse or by way of transformation? Right?
I love that.
Radical change is coming. We just have to make sure we choose the right kind.
I get so excited by what you're saying here, and particularly this notion of appealing to what people already know and already feel in their guts. And that's so powerful. And what I feel has been going on the last 10, 20 years in politics globally, I see it in the United States where I'm at, and we see it all through the world. And that somehow people on the far right have understood this. They've understood that people are terrified, that they are discontented, they're feeling ignored, that they don't see a good future. And they have taken that energy people have and harnessed it into basically the authoritarian directions and directions of like seeing others as the enemy. And of course, what that has done is actually maintain the system in its current form and let people just sort of taken the elites off the hook. What I love about what you're offering is that it's an alternative to that. You also, as I perceive it, are meeting people where they're at, and you're speaking to that deep sense of discontent. You're offering them a different direction, a direction of empowerment, a direction where they can actually see themselves as part of a solution rather than seeing others as part of some problem, and actually move towards something positive.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things. So I did this essay in Perspectiva a few years ago to kind of launch the idea of the new moderate flank, which we're now calling the Climate Majority Project. And the postscript to that essay was called "Why the New Moderate Flank is More Radical Than the Radical Flank." And this is one of the things I brought out in that postscript, that the radical flank has done wonderful things in the last few years, but it's been a little bit kind of old-fashioned in the way that most of those wonderful things have been centered around the idea of making demands of other people. And, you know, there's that old phrase, power doesn't concede anything without a demand. It never has and it never will. And maybe that's right, but I want to say also that there's another kind of power which isn't interested in just making demands of other people, but is saying, no, we're going to just start doing it ourselves, right?
Yes.
And this is the way in which I think we offer a kind of really kind of empowering, broadly kind of bottom up sense. So people building local community resilience,
Yes.
people reworking businesses from the inside out, people as part of the regular activities of those businesses, lobbying governments to say, we want you to insist that people do things the right way so that we don't get undercut by bad actors who are, you know, who are not doing the kind of things that are necessary if we're going to have a common shared future together, right?
Right.
These kinds of, you could call it direct action, right? Non-violent direct action.
Yes, yeah.
It's the most direct, it's perfectly legal,
Yes.
right? It's perfectly legal. And that, we believe, is a lot of what we need. It's absolutely clear that our leaders, so-called leaders, have chronically let us down. And to continue to outsource the responsibility and the power to our so-called leaders, or for that matter to scientists, or for that matter to activists, these are gestures which are increasingly not credible. What we need to do is to offer people ways of acting with others to really realize and generate their own empowerment, especially, but not only on a local basis.
Yes.
Again, that's how localization is so important. And when enough of that happens, we believe, when enough of that happens, that will be a big part of creating the conditions for the change in political culture, which will make it possible to finally, for example, elect leaders who actually will be willing to lead and will be willing to do the right thing. But to expect that leaders are going to come along, listen to our rational demands and just suddenly decide to do the right thing, that is just not credible any longer. So let's help people, let's help each other to step into our full power. And I think that what the radical flank have shown magnificently over the last several years, especially in 2019, is what we're capable of when we determine to speak the truth and when we get really authentic in our presentation of it. That's something that we in XR try to evince. For example, something I tried to show when I was on the media back in those days. And it's something which Greta was, again, absolutely superb about. But it now needs to be, if you will, democratized. Right?
Yes.
We all need to do that. We all need to do that as parents, as citizens, as workers or employees or business owners or whatever it is. And when enough of us start doing that and start getting a taste of that power and agency, then we will change the political culture in such a way that the more macro systems will be forced to shift too.
This is so great. As you're talking, I'm feeling, well, this is happening in the UK. We could use something like this in the US too. What are your thoughts as to the sort of global reach of the Climate Majority Project? Do you have ideas about that?
Well, yeah, we certainly do. We certainly do. Our initial aim is to prove concept in Britain.
Right, okay.
And that's not going to be as quick as it was with Extinction Rebellion, because we're not talking about something which is sort of, you know, instantly kind of viral and instantly headline grabbing. We're talking about something which is going to take some more time. People sometimes say in response, yeah, but we don't have time. Actually, guess what? It's going to take time, and there's going to be suffering and difficulty along the way. There's no way around from that now. You know, if you've got some shortcuts, some credible, honestly, genuinely shortcut, please tell me, I'm all ears. But I think I've pretty much heard them all, and none of them add up, right? We're not going to geoengineer our way out of this, or at least I bloody well hope we're not. There is no techno fix. The radical flank is not going to sweep to victory tomorrow. There isn't going to be a worldwide eco-socialist government by the end of next week or even the end of next year, right? It's going to take time. But as it takes time, one of the things that we are doing, and we're already getting a lot of interest from people in various different countries, is to liaise with people in other countries who are trying to do the same kind of thing. And ultimately, I mean, putting it fairly boldly, what we imagine is the Climate Majority Project or something like it worldwide. Right,
the global majority project.
Well, yeah, and it is about ultimately the global majority, of course, by the way, right? Ultimately, it's about supporting people in the global south, for example, through the recognition that 1.5 is dead, through the recognition that we have to take adaptation seriously now. There is no alternative. Through the recognition that ultimately we sink or swim in this together. So the Climate Majority Project, the Global Majority Project, ultimately even in places like China, for example. I think it's pretty much impossible to imagine something like Extinction Rebellion happening in China. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. And I've been talking with one or two people in China already about this. to imagine something like the Climate Majority Project happening in China. There are ways, and I'm sure this makes some sense to you with the thinking you've done about China and ecological civilization. So look, it's going to be really, really hard. It's going to take time, but yeah, we are serious about doing this on a global basis, and we are interested if people are serious about trying to initiate some of this where they are elsewhere in the world now. We're interested in liaising with such people. So I would encourage anyone who's like, I really want to do this now in the Bay Area or Germany or India. If you're really serious about it, please feel free to get in touch with us.
Well, that's so great. And then just to close, Rupert, if people are hearing this conversation and they can't wait for the book, but they've got to wait, if they want to find out more, what's the way they can find you on the web?
Great. Well, start by going to climatemajorityproject.earth. You can also easily find me personally on social media. I'm most active on Twitter. And yeah, I would encourage people to get active online and to learn that way and to connect that way. But also another crucial dimension of this that we stress is that there's only so much that you can do online, right? We're really interested, we're fundamentally interested in change that will happen from local communities, in change that will happen through workplaces, businesses and professions, churches, civic institutions. It's that kind of level of where we are together with other people with strong ties that we think is going to be our salvation, and that the state level, the international level, the global level, those things will only be able to get right if first we actually reclaim our power in a serious way at this sort of meso level, the level of about 150 people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I wish you every success in what goes on, and look forward to talking more about this.
Thank you, and thanks for your support.
Yeah, take care. Thank you. Great. 31 minutes and 49 minutes.
Oh, how about that?
Right about. Great
nice timing.
Beautiful. That was,
I got very excited there. It nice.
I was.
Felt nice. I don't always get that excited.
Good energy. Good energy coming through.
Yeah.
I'm sure I got it. Yeah, exactly. Don't say, oh,